Okay, guys. Um, I think we're ready to kick off. Yeah, Jacqueline? Okay. So th this session really was an outgrowth from some conversations that Jacqueline had on the forums for how I suppose generally speaking, trying to juggle being an amazing parent for our youth. And of course, Pesach is a time where we want particularly to try to give our children and our youth something. And what we're probably finding is that the older our kids get, the harder it is to for finding the afikomen or standing on a chair and singing Manashtana to really do it for them.
They're a bit over throwing cotton balls as hail now.
Yeah. And 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 kind of our repertoire ends there. So it gets a little bit more challenging, what's left. And maybe we look back and think, well, what did our parents do to kind of keep us going? How did they achieve that? How did that work? And I guess for some of you, it would be the dynamic of the Seder experience, of everything which is going on, and like the whole atmosphere and the buildup and the families coming together and all that type of stuff, which fed into it, which is useful because then there's some momentum going. Obviously, this year you can't really do that, but I think more fundamentally, it might be possible that there are other narratives at play going on for your youth as well, where they might be in school, even in a Jewish school, where they might have friends who don't take these things as seriously, or don't communicate the significance that Pesach is supposed to bring to the family home. So whereas perhaps in previous generations you could rely on, this is what we do, and this is what Jews do. So we get into it, and everyone purchases loads of kosher Pesach chocolate, and everyone does lots of turning the house over, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe you didn't grow up with that, which is absolutely fine if that's not something that you had specific exposure to. But certainly today, it might not be able to take it for granted. So on the one hand, you have this ongoing thing of how to engage with children as they get older. And second of all, you can't simply just rely on the momentum carrying itself as perhaps it would have been as easy in previous generations. So I think because we're in a smaller group, this is probably an appropriate forum, maybe for you to share either some of your thoughts about the struggles regarding Pesach in youth, and possibly maybe some of your hopes of what you would want to accomplish for Pesach and your kids as well. Jacqueline, do you want to add anything to that before I open up to everyone else?
That's good.
Okay, so yeah, the floor is yours, guys. Thinking about Pesach and thinking about what you would like to achieve with your kids, and maybe what you're concerned about not being able to do it for whatever reason. If you share, hopefully we could add towards what we're going to present as part of it. It's up to you.
Well, I just really want it to be a fun experience, because I remember Seder nights as just being really boring. There was one person at the top reading all the Hebrew, and all the other adults were chatting about other things. So when our kids were little, I wanted to make it really fun. So I did all the bits that we know about, the throwing of the frogs and the whatever. And then I did a bit of a transition bit where I'd throw in various questions and quizzes and things like that. But now I feel like, especially with it just being a small family unit rather than the extended family, how do you make that fun still?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things which will bring them back to the table in continued years is leaving a good taste in their mouth from the Seder experience, and fun is a very strong element in that, and how to have mature fun, how to have fun in a way which is age appropriate, of course, is something. And obviously, I say obviously, hopefully we'll get a chance to share a particular video from Rabbi Sacks, but the whole point of Seder is about the kids. We know that. Seder is the focus is on engaging with our children. That's what it's there for. And you want to get it right. And them having a good time clearly has to be an important element of that. Absolutely. Debbie?
So, similar to what Anna was saying, like it was about the games and the activities, and it was about the big family gatherings that made it fun, and all the in-jokes and all the stuff like that, which is now obviously not so possible. I mean, I find that we actually do most of it in English with the purpose of engaging the kids and making it. And what my brother did last year was he tried to pick out in advance parts of the Seder service and ask the kids to draw parallels in their life and how would they feel about this. So maybe not so fun, but more making them think about what the meaning is behind the Seder service. So, you know, how and I think with COVID, there is links to the plagues in some respect, not saying that this is a plague, but you know, it's tested us and our kids' resilience, even fighting to keep doing the Seders where perhaps things are sort of seem more stacked against the normal Seders. I think there's quite a lot of discussion topics that could be drawn out, even if it's less focused on the actual words of the service to some extent.
Yeah, and any feedback for us on how well it worked with the planning that your brother did last year? Like, did it seem to hit the mark? Did it seem to work?
Yeah, well, because I suppose I was lucky in the sense that his two kids are the same age as my two, so between the four of them, they enjoyed it. Whether it would work so well if it had just been my two doing it, I don't know.
Okay, thank you for that, Debbie. So adding in an element of obviously wanting them to have a good experience, but maybe it being meaningful or relevant at the age that they are might also work in some way as well. Thank you. Anyone else want to share if you'd like to? Obviously. Okay. So that's really the Jacqueline, sorry. That's really the road that we want to go down this evening, to try to get that balance between making it a fun or positive or a good experience for our kids. But we're also looking at the same time to make it a meaningful experience. Now, when we originally built this talk, we were really responding to a need of our own need, the same as everyone else's, of how to make it meaningful and how to make it enjoyable for our kids. You know, since we advertise this, all of you, I assume, most of you would have received information and been aware of another stark example of the struggles that our youth are going through in their day-to-day lives. If I need to be more explicit in my references, feel free to tell me to be more explicit. But specifically of a young girl who couldn't overcome the struggles that she was having. So, although that's not the subject for this evening, for this conversation, I do think it's relevant to it, because one time of year that we may get a chance to really have some amount of undivided attention from our kids for a slightly more extended period of time is Seder night. And therefore, it's beyond it being an opportunity from the Pesach point of view, or from the point of view of from a Jewish point of view, that we want to to get them interested. But also, I think we deeply care about our kids. And we deeply care about our kids being okay. And this is a good opportunity to utilize to help with that as well. Does that make sense? So it's just another element of the perspective that we might want to add, considering what we want to try to achieve on Seder night, beyond it being a good experience, beyond it being something that hopefully they'll want to come back to, a meaningful experience, but also a chance to try to give them a little bit more resilience, to give them a little bit more attention, a little bit more care as well. So with those kind of things in mind, perhaps we could start looking at some of the things that I have, that I and maybe and any contributions from anyone else have been thinking about in terms of this year. So one of my big topics, which I like, which I found as I've begun to have teenagers of my own, that we've begun to have teenagers of our own, have been important, is an appreciation of the family story. Because we think of Pesach in terms of our communal story, our national story, our history. But there's also very much a element of the family story, the story of what makes you guys you, where do they come from, what their identity, the memories that make up your particular family narrative. And what I've begun to think about in terms of Seder is not just using it to tell the national story, but also somehow to also share the family story. Now, to be fair, perhaps your kids might not be interested in your particular family story. I remember when I was driving around, my father was driving around on a Sunday to visit my grandmother, and he would say, "Oh, that's the shul I was bar mitzvahed in. Oh, that's the rabbi's home." And that's, and at the time, I couldn't care less. My father would call it history in the making, right? History in the making. I now look back at it, and I can look at those landmarks and think, oh, that's where and it means something to me. That's the shul that my father was bar mitzvahed in. That's the rabbi's home. And because he planted those seeds, perhaps doing it in a way at the time that was a bit slightly over the top, but I have a very good identity around my family story. And these things mean a lot to me. Now that we're trying to build a story for our kids as well. And I wonder, because it's a small Seder, whether there is a facility to use the evening as well to talk about the family story, not just about the Seder story. And rather than just using a Haggadah, are there any other props that can be used, or any other elements that can be used to talk about the family, to talk about the family experience? And therefore, it's not just about telling the Jewish story, but it's about telling our story as well. Any thoughts on that as a model or as an idea to utilize?
I wanted to share something actually in one of the groups that I ran with Jeanette Marks, a member of our community whose mother, I believe, went through the concentration camps. And she said they have this family tradition, which you can see, it's like a newspaper article she actually gave me a copy of, but it's a Seder ritual of remembrance for the millions of Jews who perished at the hands of the Nazis and for the heroes of the ghetto uprising. And she said, actually, at the point when you go out to open the door for Elijah, they have their own kind of text that they read, which, I thought maybe we can incorporate that into our discussion this year, because it's quite interesting how to talk about the Holocaust, or how to bring the Holocaust into our discussions. And I think especially if that is part of our family narrative, which I know from some of you on here, that is part of, your your relatives, you have that in your family history. So I think it is quite an interesting idea to find those points. And I think it all kind of what you're saying, Elchanan, and I think Debbie, you made this point as well. The Haggadah is really like a scaffolding. So it's a basic outline, but it's not like you have to stick to, this is what the night's all about, is reading all the different paragraphs. That's just a beginning of discussion. So I think, that for me was a really lovely way of saying, well, that's a really good point in the story to bring in the idea of, what did it feel like when they opened the door and they didn't know who was standing outside, or how they were treated and things like that. So I think that taking certain points along the Haggadah and seeing how to make them relevant to our family and to its history, I think is very powerful.
Yeah, and obviously the Holocaust is a key one, but we ran an event last week for the Uyghur genocide, which is going on in China at the moment, and we had a representative from the I think the director of the World Uyghur Congress who came to speak about what was happening, and to take the opportunity beforehand to print off some stuff from BBC or some things about what's happening with the Uyghur genocide, and to talk about buying products from China, or about looking to see whether there's a role to play about remembering that we were once oppressed in Egypt, and therefore we have to remember those who are oppressed as well, and to speak out against tyranny, or to speak out against genocide, and the role that we can play in that. Once again, it's more sophisticated, it's more mature. It might not be for all age ranges to discuss, but on the other hand, being socially aware obviously is a very important Jewish value, and it's also one that speaks to our kids as well. So it's hard to get to connect to what happened 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago, but it's easier to connect to what's happening now, and to utilize the lessons that we have learned as a people to help others as well. And I think there's a place for that in a meaningful Seder. There should be a place for that in a meaningful Seder as well.
And I think also connecting into what you were saying about before, if we want to bring it further closer to home, you've got the themes of peer pressure and how power and understanding bullying and all those issues, which we really need to have very serious conversation with our kids about. But framing it and opening the conversation through the Haggadah is actually quite a more neutral basis to be able to have an open conversation about it, rather than saying, right, I'm going to sit you down and we're going to talk about peer pressure. Then we all know our kids glaze, their eyes are going to glaze over, and that's the end of the discussion. Whereas if we can interweave it into the way that, the way the Egyptians treated the Jewish people, or the way that Moses stood up to what was going on, and have that as part of the discussion, but making it relevant to today, I think that's it's a great scaffolding to be able to have these really important discussions.
Yeah, and because you're not tied to the Hebrew, there's no reason why your kids couldn't read out those paragraphs, and therefore give them a bit of ownership over what's being shared. You're responding to the questions that you are asking questions on what they've read, rather than them having to come up with questions to what you've read. And it makes it a little bit easier to set the stage for them to feel engaged. And by the way, this might not be completely reflected in our family, but sometimes less is more as well. The key of a meaningful Seder is not to make it to midnight and with everyone still somehow awake and schlepping themselves through, and there's nothing wrong with having a concentrated and thought-provoking Seder and enjoyable Seder. I do think, by the way, and this really should apply to all ages, having yummy treats along the way for your kids is like such a no-brainer. You know, they might not like prizes, but by gosh, they are going to be happy to have sweets if they're provided, and therefore to have ready bowls available for munching in this free zone of Seder night will keep them at the table a lot longer than promising them, you know, a great afikomen present along the way as well. So I would say
our kids have said that they want you know, Amazon vouchers as well as part of their, you know, keeping them engaged all night. So that you know, whatever, this is the night that it's worth investing in terms of both time and, you know, whatever it takes for them to just love it.
You could just use the word bribery, Jacqueline. Bribery is it's a fine word to use.
Yeah. We actually call it Amazon bribes. It works. But you know, it's about just, you know, making them feel part of it. And I think one of the really important things as well is to know your child or your children, because every one of them is going to have different things that they are really passionate about. So if your child is very much into, you know, social justice and it's not fair and why is that allowed, so then bring all those things to the table. If they love doing things in teams and competitions, then bring that to the table. Like, I think that you know, if this is our most important night of the year to educate our children and to communicate our feelings about our Judaism and our values about life to them, so then you're not going to just show up on the night and kind of sit there and go like, okay, right, now let's, you know, if this was your main work presentation or your main test or examination, whatever it is, you prepare, of course you do. So I think that part of that preparing, and you know, I can see that lots of us have children in all different sorts of age brackets, but we've got to think of ways that each of them with their personalities and ages can feel that there's something for them, that they love the night. That's the goal at the end of the day. We want them to walk away at the end of the night and say that was a great Seder.
Yeah, and most of them will have, not all of them, but most of them will probably have reached a stage where they're not bringing home their own materials that, you know, that they've prepared or they've learned, which they might have done in school or cheder or something like that. The bottom line is, unless you set them something and are brave enough to actually get them to do something beforehand, that they are not going to come in with too much forward momentum into this thing. So they come in and you have to get started. One of the ideas that Jacqueline and I discussed was, who says you need the Seder table? And like, you know, obviously you think, well, of course you need a Seder table because you always have a Seder table. Well, not really. You need a Seder plate. But who says that Seder plate can't be on the coffee table and you're all around couches for the discussion? Who says you have to be formally at the table? I know you're thinking, what about spilt wine and things like that? I'll let you deal with the technicalities of how all that might work. But if the forum for your family is sitting around in the lounge and doing the Haggadah part and the discussion part around, then do that and don't feel tied to have to reenact 1978. You know, it doesn't have to be a specific model of how it's going to on how it will engage. Just as a suggestion.
And you can talk about, like, this is freedom, right? We're all sitting, you know, we're sitting on our couches, we're leaning back, we're enjoying the comfy of being on our couches for Seder night. And obviously for the meal, we'll go to the table, but actually, why not? Maybe if that's a more conducive discussion area, then let's have Seder on the couches.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are certain restrictions for Chag. But dare I say it, you know, there are halachically permissible ways of creating of lighting a fire pit. You could have the conversation around a fire pit in your back garden if you particularly happen to have one. The solemnity is around Seder night, but not around the specific structure that you need to have everyone at the table with the table completely set and ready for a meal that's only going to hit a little bit further on down the road, depending on how you're going to structure things. Now,
I think especially because, please God, we really hope next year we'll all be able to go back to our big Seders with, you know, grandparents where you do have to sit properly at the table, and, you know, where there's too many people to be on the couches. So actually maybe this can be the year where we just mix it up. It can be really just small and intimate and just feel like a completely different type of Seder, that they're always going to, you know, I keep thinking that someone's going to say to them, so grandma, tell me, what was Seder night like in lockdown? You know, like what did it really feel like? You know, that's what they're going to tell their children about. And you can't even believe what we did. We sat, you know, in the garden, or we sat on the couches, and this was the way the Seder was. You know, this is the memories we're giving them.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same ring to it as when we were evacuated to, during, and the bombs are falling down. It doesn't have exactly the same feel, but, you know, hopefully it could still be. It should really, really be special. That's really the key. Now, bibliodrama is something that is. You know, if you saw the Hebrew Hamilton thing, it's a really kind of good example of it on a massive scale. But in having, and really, I would say everyone really should get involved, because it's easier just to point the kids. But if there are parts of the Seder, parts of the narrative that can be interpreted and enacted by people in your family as part of the Seder experience, if your family are that way inclined towards drama or towards interpretation, that's a really, really powerful medium of expression. Because whether it's being done through a combination of song and acting, or whether it's role playing, or whatever it might be, you can really get into that role. And doing so, it can bring the Seder to life, which is really the whole point of it. So you might want to choose 1 or 2 episodes from the Seder experience, and it doesn't have to be the obvious ones. It doesn't have to be, the plagues, you know, and then everyone starts throwing things at each other, or getting whipped by taskmasters. It could be the experience. It could be the experience of being hungry, of what it means not to have food, or it could be an experience of what it means to save a child who is adrift in a basket. It could be the experience of someone from the eyes of a woman who suddenly has this child thrust upon them. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you choose, if that's something which you fully can embrace. There could be a lot of fun in that. I think there can be. So that's just another example of trying to make the Seder experience a little bit more relevant, and to have a feeling of yourself, which is tied into it. Now, I don't know if your families have particular, like, you know, parody songs that you guys enjoy, that you kind of sing every year, and the classics that, you know, the families get into. Obviously, you want to use the familiarity stuff as well. So if there's the different things which kind of make your Seder, then of course you want to go for it as well. And, you know, in our family, we're big advocates of Who Knows One. You know, I know one, and that really is the crescendo of the whole evening. Don't lose that, because you're looking at other added things. Is obviously you want to keep the fan favorites going as well, with experimenting. And I guess the other side of the experimenting is it's okay for things to flop as well. Like, not everything has to really hit home and feel like, I really scored 10 out of 10 on that one. I mean, it's no different than the rest of parenting, right? So, like, you know, why we can't put that much pressure on ourselves to have to get it 100%. The point is that, as Jacqueline said, it's the investment of time beforehand. It's coming on to sessions like this. You will receive, hopefully between now and Pesach, a big box box bag, whatever, from the community, which will have loads of resources in it. A tip: open it up before Seder night and give it a good look, because the real professionals in education have put a lot of work into those materials, and you'll find a lot of really good resources that will be there for you to take full advantage of for your Seder. That will make it kind of the best Seder in all of Hertfordshire, from having those features in there. Also, outside our house and outside the Ket's house from Sunday will be additional resources that can be used. And you can pick and choose what you want from it as well. So some of the things which we're, some of the programming side, tomorrow evening we'll discuss a little bit more, because we're going to run a session just on how to use all the programming materials that we have available. But tonight really is more about teenagers specifically and youth. Have your kids thought at all about Seder? Have you actually mentioned anything to them about the fact that Seder's coming? Are they even aware that Pesach might be coming sometime in the near future for our people? Or is it going to hit them like a bolt of lightning, like what's going on? What's happening to the dishes? Why is there no more shreddies in this house, or something like that? And that's what our kids are saying to us at this point in time. We had this massive discussion: should we buy another box of shreddies? On the one hand, apparently it's not a obligation for kids to starve or families to starve before Pesach. On the other hand, it's tradition for them to starve before Pesach. So we have that kind of balance that we're working towards as well.
Do you know what would be great? Is if there were like a PS4 computer game of the Exodus, and everybody could take turns in being a different role character, and then going through the different.
And
I think, isn't it on Minecraft that they build the scene themselves? So maybe that's what they need to do, is they need to build the Egypt. That's the.
There are any budding programmers.
Yeah. When they were kids, there was the Prince of Egypt. That's a lovely kind of way to put across the. It's not very accurate, but it's a Disneyized kind of way of putting it across. But I think this is when we all talk about how the technology is taking over our lives. How wonderful that we've got this evening to say, actually, tonight I want to talk to you about what's important to me, how I want you to understand Judaism, why this is something that we've chosen to have in our family. Why do we keep Seder night when there's so many families who don't? Why is this still a value that we want to be there? Why is it important that we get together with grandparents? And obviously this year we can't. Why are these all the things that mean so much to us? And I remember one year when I was probably 15 or 16, I think. I don't know how we got, someone randomly came to our house for Seder night. I think somehow through the community, someone didn't have somewhere to go, and they thought ours would be a fun place to put this poor gentleman on Seder night. So I'm one of 6. You can imagine our household was hectic. But this guy who came to us was an Oxford professor in philosophy. So this was, and I don't think he normally went to Seder night. So this was a real interesting experience for him. And we probably spent 3 hours talking about the wicked son, because he couldn't get past that part. And that was what he was really fascinated by. And I remember that year, it still stays in my mind so strongly, because that year was only about, this was what he wanted to talk about. The rest of it, we must have gone through in about 10 minutes, because we were quite strict at finishing by midnight to have the afikoman. So it was like, sometimes we get so stuck on we have to go through all the bits of the Seder. Honestly, it probably takes 10 or 15 minutes if you want to really go through it quickly, read it in English. We all know that, right? We all know people who do it like that and it's finished. But actually, it's not just about that. It's about the much bigger conversation. So talking about how do we in our family view people who we view as, the wicked people and the good people, and actually, if you want to bring the conversation, how do we view people who've been breaking the rules at the moment? Have we become more intolerant of other people over lockdown? These are probably a lot of the conversations that we want to have around our table, because actually I think that this past year has changed the way that we're tolerant of other people, and it has made us more judgmental, and we need to talk about that. So yes, of course, it would be lovely to kind of outsource this as much as we could, and if there was a way just to teach this to our children. But it's much bigger than the Pesach story. This is about our way of telling our children what really we care about, what we want them to understand. You know, have we had a conversation with our children about the fact that we'd like them to marry someone Jewish and bring that person home to our Seder table? Have we even asked our children? Have we even spoken about it at our table? Or is it just one of those things that maybe our parents said to us, maybe they didn't, maybe we just don't discuss? Maybe we can talk about that at Seder. If we don't tell our children, they'll never know.
Yeah, and what does it mean that we're proud to be Jewish? You know, maybe in 2021, being proud to be a specific faith is frowned upon. Maybe we need to get our heads around what you know, how our ideals and values fit in 2012. Maybe they need to teach us where we're getting it wrong. I mean, my kids do that to me all the time, you know, to kind of, you know, straighten out my mind and the appropriate way of thinking about things. But Seder night's a great time to do this, especially when you have a smaller, more intimate experience. Maybe, and obviously everything is age appropriate, but maybe any topic is open for discussion. And because this is a great time to talk and a great time to share. There's no wrong, and the important thing is that there's no wrong questions, or sorry, there's no no such thing as kids saying the wrong thing or being told off, not on Seder night.
That's really important. I think that, you know, we've spoken on here before about, you know, the idea of accepting our kids and respecting them, but I think especially Seder night, when we want them to walk away from it with the memory forever that Seder night is something that's wonderful. We need them. That's what we need them to do. This is our really important mission to them. So there can't be any, you know, why did you spill the wine? Everyone spills the wine, right? We all have those Haggadahs that have the wine spilt all over them. But even more than that, not correcting them, not, you know, trying to tell them the right way to say it. Not tonight. Tonight, it's just about, let's have those great conversations. And if they go on way past our bedtime, and if the dinner gets cold, none of that matters. There's always chocolate, right?
Yeah, and if the kids say, how come no one's telling me off? Why is this night different from every other night? Then you've succeeded. You've had a wonderful Seder. And you know, you can have, and everyone's entitled to have a lie-in on the next morning, except for the rabbi. Besides for that, everyone feel free. And dare I say, and perhaps this will really not go down well, you could even do the clearing up the next day rather than having it done that night. I saw someone's eyebrow raise on that one particularly. That's fine, but you know. Maybe that's just our household, you know, and if you have different rules.
Don't give away our secrets.
Sorry.
Nobody knows. Especially this year, nobody's seen the inside of our house. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I think also that the more important than our side of it, it's actually about trying to get our kids to ask the questions or to make points. And, you know, the resources that are going to be shared to you. I think, Achon, one of them's to do with leadership, isn't it? And let them, give it to them beforehand, even if it's just one of the cards, give it to them beforehand. You choose which point you want them to talk about, or social action, or giving, or whatever it is that you want, and let them read it out, or let them present it, or let them raise the question. The idea of asking questions is more about them asking than what answers we give them. And I think that's also really important, that the kids can know that we don't know all the answers. That's fine. Right, even on the Seder night, when we do say Manish Tana, we don't really answer any of those questions. We ask all these great questions. Why do we do all these weird things tonight? And then there's no answer. And I think even just that message to show them that actually what we want from them is we want them to ask and engage and to challenge. And those are such wonderful things in Judaism. They're not things that we're scared of. You know, if there are questions we can't answer, well, that's Elchonan's job. It's fine. You know, you could just send them his way. That's what he, you know, and if he doesn't know, then he's got people he can ask as well. Right. Always, for some reason, our kids tend to ask the most complex philosophical questions just when he's not around. Like, why didn't you ask Abba? Like, why me? You know, but this is it. It's about the questions. And that's what we're really trying to get our teenagers to do, is to challenge. This is the night when we're encouraging them to challenge everything that we say, right? The rest of the time, we're like, why can't you just do what I say? Tonight, we want them to say why. We want them to say how, where, what. It's just not okay. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to encourage them to be themselves and to ask.
Jacqueline, do I have permission to share something from Rabbi Sacks, because it's just so good. It's not long, guys, but is one of the more special things I've heard him say. So I just think that. Sorry, I'm going to share the screen because I just want to make sure it went on. I mean, obviously, it's just good to hear his voice, really, more than even anything else, to be honest. But this is particularly special. So, yeah. I spoke in the beginning about the stories and the links and the identity which is attached to, and this is Rabbi Sacks really talking about how he sees Seder night.
On behalf of Elena and myself, I'd like to wish you and your families a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a wonderful Pesach, to you, to us, to Kol Beit Yisrael. Friends, you know, when you read the story of the Exodus, when you read the Pesach story, you come across something so remarkable, so counterintuitive. It's there in Parshat Bo, it's reflected in the Haggadah itself, which is that when Moshe Rabbeinu addresses the Israelites on the very brink of their liberation, they've been in exile for 210 years. They've been enslaved. They've seen their male children killed, slow genocide. And what does he talk about? He doesn't talk about the destination that awaited them, the Eretz Zavat Chalav U'Devash, the land flowing with milk and honey. He doesn't talk about the dangers they may face along the way. He doesn't talk about liberty. Instead, what he does is 3 times he talks about the duty to hand on the story to your children. When your child asks you in the future, when your children say this to you, so shall you say to them, you shall instruct your child on that day. 3 of the 4 children of the Haggadah occurred then, before the Exodus. Now, work that out. They haven't yet left Egypt. They haven't had the Exodus. And already he's talking about years ahead, how they will remember and recall and tell the story to their children in generations to come. It's a most counterintuitive thing. Why is he doing it? He's doing it for a most profound reason. In fact, for the reason that made Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is no slouch in political philosophy himself, regard Moses as the greatest political leader of all time, the only person ever to have endowed a people with eternity. The answer is, nations need identity. Identity needs memory, and memory depends on the story we tell ourselves and our children as to who we are. If you preserve that memory forever, you will preserve that people forever. It's a fascinating story to realize that in Europe, after the great wars of religion in the 16th and 17th century, there was this move, the Enlightenment, to abolish identity. We'll all be brothers, there'll be no more nations anymore, there's just be this universal of humankind. Well, that gave way in the 19th century to the return of the repressed. Identity came back, roaring back, either in the form of nationalism or race or class and ideology. And that in the 20th century, nationalism gave rise to 2 world wars, racism gave rise to the Holocaust, and class war gave rise to Stalin, the Gulag, and the KGB. Since the 1960s, the West has been engaged in another flight from identity, this time not into universals, but into individuals. And again, we are seeing the return of the repressed right now. in the form of identity politics. Everyone has a grievance and everyone therefore has an identity. And this is dividing nations within themselves. You can see it in the warfare over free speech on university campuses. Judaism says, yes, we have identities. But if we can really remember our identity all the way back to when our ancestors were slaves in Egypt, then we will use our memory, our identity, to create a free society and to extend that freedom to others, which is what Jews have always tried to do. And that is what we need, the memories that will encourage us to remember who we are and answer the three fundamental questions all of us must ask. Who am I? Why am I here? How then shall I live? That is why Pesach, the festival of Jewish identity, was the greatest institution ever devised, and why when we tell our story, better still when we hear our children, or for Elaine and me, our grandchildren tell that story, we know we too are part of the Olam, the eternal people. Chag Kasher Sameach.
Okay, guys. As I said, it's always good to hear from Rabbi Sacks. Just beautiful, and no one can articulate things and bring things down the way he can. But that to me is the core idea of what we've been discussing. We're giving our kids identity through Seder night. It's the platform that we have a chance to do that. It's the forum given to us to be used for that exact purpose. It's a great privilege being parents, of having the opportunity, just like your parents, our parents had that opportunity for us. Now we have that opportunity for our kids as well. It's a great privilege, but fair enough. It's brought us here this evening to say, well, how the heck are we going to do it? Perhaps some of the ideas that we've shared have been useful. Your kids, as Jacqueline said, and speaking to them is really important. Some of the resources that you'll be receiving will also help as well.
One of the resources that I don't know, are we giving it out or going to be emailed, is the escape room, which is really cool because it literally goes through every one of the steps of the Seder like an escape room, and you can have one for each person around the table. And it's just incredible. My friend Lisa Levine in Belmont, it's just incredible way of experiencing Seder night. I think we're going to probably do that for second night Seder, so it's not just here we come again and why are we doing this again. It's a really interactive, cool way of celebrating Seder night in a completely different way, which works better probably in a smaller group. So that's just one example. But like I said, there's games, there's topic cards, there's that side of it, the ideas side of it you're going to be getting in the next few days. But like Elchanan said, the more that you can prepare beforehand, not looking at it fresh, have some thoughts about it, or get your kids, if they're the sort of kids who like doing this kind of thing, give it to them to make the skit or come up with a poem or whatever it is that they enjoy doing. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and also, if they could help choose the setting, they could choose what the table's going to look like. They could choose even the menu, what's going to be served. I think our kids said steak and chips, but I'm not sure that's going to make it past the censor.
We've got a bit of an argument. Do we stick with the traditional salt beef and chicken, or do we go with the steak and chips? I'm not sure how flexible I'm going to be about that one. We'll see.
It'll be marshmallows around your campfire, won't it?
Oh, so I think we might have to get our campfire. I think that's going to be a good investment for this year. I hope it doesn't melt our decking. That's all.
It'll be worth it. It's
just imagine. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. And there was another point that was raised when we did have the session. I think Debbie, you spoke about the idea of Pesach's a really interesting one in terms of for our teens to realize that a lot of their peers do very differently to them. So when they're not Jewish, it's much easier to kind of see, like, that's fine, I do this because I'm Jewish. That's what you were describing, wasn't it? When you're the one of the only Jewish people in a school, so then you can say the reason that I eat matzah the whole of Pesach, that's my tradition. But how to empower our children when the customs that they're keeping, not necessarily all of their Jewish friends are. And I think that actually, maybe this is an ideal way to have those discussions about being proud of who you are, being okay to be different, social pressures, peer pressure, etc. Those kind of conversations. Maybe this is quite a safe way to have those discussions. I think as parents, we can't be afraid of those kind of things, because actually, it might be now it's to do with Pesach, but it could be to do with so many other things not even connected to Judaism. Like our kids, this is a skill that they do need to learn, is how to be okay with being me, even if that's different from you being you. And again, like, I think that that's a great discussion to have. I don't think there is like an easy answer, but I do think another thing that can really help is to make sure that, whatever they're having over Pesach feels like the best treats in the world. Like, why wouldn't you want to keep Pesach? So it does mean even, it does mean sometimes investing even that more effort that you can't really be bothered to make or there's just too much going on to have to make the extra thing. So, if your kids love baking, let them do it. But even if they don't, maybe it's going that extra mile to show them, you know what, this is so important to me that you love this too. So I'm going to put in that extra effort, or get that, I don't know, the special chocolate spread or whatever it is that you feel that it's so exciting that we have Pesach, not that, oh, why can't I have what all my other friends have?
Yeah, but could we draw the line? No Pesach cereal, that we banned that in our house. So just such a waste of
We
money.
just don't like it.
Oh,
Yeah.
no one ever eats the stuff. Oh,
Yeah.
no, I refuse. Besides for that, but I guess the idea is Pesach about deprivation. If it's about deprivation, then obviously they'll see their friends that are doing things different, or is Pesach special, and we're privileged to have it. I mean, the same thing with anything, whether it's Pesach, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's kashrut, whether everything. There's always going to be competing factors, and you can't beat them by saying this is how we do things. It does have to come an embodied feeling that we're special, that we can have that. And Pesach's a really good forum, as Jacqueline said, to help your kids with that.
So I don't know if it's because Elchonan's on this evening, but everyone's been very, very quiet. So let's hear from some of you. Unmute yourself. Tell us what you think. I know it's a bigger crowd than we usually have, but let's hear from you what you think works or what challenges. What are your thoughts?
It is me, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, it's not you. I've heard a lot of good ideas tonight, and I think it's all about the interaction for sure. And we've been talking about the last sort of couple of weeks anyway, that what maybe we should do. But I love the ideas of just thinking about the family and our histories, and just the active participation. I think that the challenge I'm still thinking about is actually not just the Seder night itself, it's more actually second night. And for the kids, being a small one, what we can do to also make sure that second night is going to be a meaningful experience, and we can get the kids to come to the table without the sulky faces, and that they are committed to wanting to make that a meaningful experience. But as I say, I want to thank you all for giving us some further inspiration to make the nights very exciting.
Thanks, and I think, Dan, that really is part of the preparation, is save some of the stuff for second night. Yep. Make sure that there's something completely, maybe the prizes are different on Seder night, or like I said, you've got on the second night, or you've got the breakout rooms, that's going to be the second night. We're doing Seder night completely different tonight. You're not going to even recognize that it feels the same as last night. So you've got almost like a theme for each of the nights. I think it does need to be more like that this year, because like we said, there's no grandparents and cousins and things to mix it up a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the idea of saving Seder around the lounge should be specifically for second night rather than being for first night, so that, they'll feel like they got a win without realizing that's all part of your crafty plan.
They can bring their pillows and fleeces. Like, you can really make it into, we're having, we're all lounging around. It felt, we did do it last year actually, and it felt so wonderful. And once Elchanan got past the wine spilling bit, I think, right?
Wonderful.
Anyone else?
I think I'm going to speak to the children and see what they like. There's been a lot of people this year have been saying, oh, tell me one thing that you remember from your childhood. What does your family do? And I want my children to have that family thing. And I'm not sure exactly what they pick up on at the moment. So I want to make sure they have something that they like, and we're definitely going to do.
Brilliant. And even Susan, if that's, they can choose, you know, what their favourite nash to be at the Seder is, or they want to decide the menu, that's fine as well. It's just about them choosing. Like, I really like that idea of letting them lead the way.
Mm.
Yeah, I think the Kets were talking about banana in chocolate for Karpas.
Yeah,
So
that's Rabbi Nick's famous banana in chocolate. Yeah.
But the only thing for me is that there's certain smells of Seder, and for me the passing saltwater is a smell that you have in the room, and I associate that, and that's gone.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm all for doing everything, but I am quite a traditionalist. I agree with you. I do like the things, as Elchonah knows, we've got every single one of the possible vegetables to dip into the salt water, but that's fine. And you know what, after you've done carapace, you can have other things to dip. You can have ketchup and chips. You can just keep dipping all night. You can make that a theme of Seder night, just to mix it up and make it fun. That's the point.
Yeah, a finger food Seder. I mean, like, you know, how cool would that be? You know, to be able to do that.
Who said marshmallows? Anna, right? Marshmallows, perfect.
Mm-hmm. Over the campfire, or
You could have one night that's very traditional with all the usual smells, the parses, whatever, and then the other night could be a wacky alternative Seder.
Yeah,
I think so. And I really think that we probably won't do something like quite as wacky ever again, because once you've got other people there, you do have to kind of be a bit more traditional. So this year is the year to just completely go for it. I love that. Like, let's make second night. We want to hear the wackier, the better. We want to hear about it afterwards. You're going to come report back to us on how wacky you managed to make your second night Seder.
Absolutely. Wow. Looking forward to hearing about it. No? I feel like if we were in their homes, it can be so much cooler than our Seder now. Gosh.
Kids could have a sleepover in the lounge and pretend it's like sleeping in the desert.
Yeah, yeah.
And you could join them.
I'm really high.
Why just the kids, Emma? Family sleep out. That would be a Seder they'll never forget.
Yeah.
Family sleep out in the lounge.
Yeah, with the dogs and cats.
You could put them in the garden.
Yeah, they're going to want a tent if you start telling our kids about that. Tent in the garden.
That's what I used to have when I was a child. That's what my grandparents always stayed in our house, and my sister and I, whose room they were in, slept downstairs. I loved it. Because I had to wait till everyone had gone to bed until we could sleep downstairs in the lounge. When I was little.
And that's what I remember. We called it the family room at my grandparents' and my grandmother's house, and literally it wasn't the largest room in the house at all. But all the kids had there's 4 couches and there's 8 different spots on the floor, and everyone kind of crammed in together, and that was Seder night. Everyone, slept in a different piece of the family room. There was loads of other places, but we all just crammed in there together. It was really, really good fun. Gosh. So I think we can wrap it up now for tonight. You guys have been amazing as always, and thank you for being interested in making Pesach, special for your kids. And I really hope it will be a meaningful one for you guys. And as Jacqueline said, hopefully this is the last year that we'll ever have to think about it being just a very specific family unit, but just kind of capitalize on it, because it's a special one-off, for you to
next
enjoy.
Year in Jerusalem. We all want to be there all together. Sponsored by the shul, right?
Or Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is good as well. It doesn't have to just be Jerusalem.
No, Jerusalem. I'd like to be in Jerusalem.
Fair enough.
Thank you. That's been really helpful.
Thanks, Lisa. Lovely to see you.